Hey,
Hey,
there.
there we are. Welcome to TechNow, the web series that takes a look at ServiceNow developers and architects and system administrators, and we show you all kinds of cool, fun stuff to build on our platform. This time, we are going to be doing some workflow stuff. I am Chuck Tomasi from ServiceNow. I'm a platform architect in the platform practice team. I help the pre-sales team, and I do workshops and wear a bow tie. Joining me is Kreg Steppe.
I almost wore a bow tie. See, I've got one.
He has a paper cutout.
Yeah. Actually, I was going to come on here and just copy everything you said and have the bow tie on. Anyway, so I'm Kreg Steppe. I'm a senior curriculum developer in our education services at ServiceNow. I've been here for about 3 years, and that's what I do. That's what I do. I build curriculum. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
All right, we won't take it quite that far.
All right. So you ready for the PowerPoint here?
Let's bring up the slides. I will lock screen on you. You're going to be driving the slides this time.
All right. So there we go.
Very nice.
And there I am. There's my beautiful mug. Again,
From
I'm
the
the
post
senior
office.
curriculum developer.
Yeah, the FBI took that one. Nice job.
Yeah. Well, no, I was actually the local police. So I specialize in cloud automation. That's what I do or did before in ITOM, as well as orchestration. I've been here since 2014, and as we go through the TechNow episodes, get a little bit further in my tenure. So I've been here for about 3 years, and we've been doing the TechNow stuff since 2016 to present. I'm into podcasting, photography, Linux, and long walks on the beach.
And rearranging furniture.
In rearranging, yes. Interior
As
design.
I mentioned, my name is Chuck Tomasi, and those are my old glasses. I have new glasses now.
Yay.
Just in case you were wondering, they've changed in the last 8 months. If you watch the series of TechNow over the last 4.5 years, you'll notice a number of changes in hairstyles, hosts, and other accoutrements. But I like to think I am part of the pillar of this thing. Started it, and it's still going. I'm going to have to update this slide. I think I've got closer to 35 years of experience now in the IT industry. And started out fresh out of college as a developer and have been doing almost every other role since then. And I was a customer for a couple of years, joined ServiceNow in 2010, and have been doing various roles within the organization. I am the proud winner of the first Innovation of the Year award, which has been supplanted by hackathons, I think, now, or something similar.
Yeah.
There's lots of other contests we offer. I think the Innovation of the Year award has been sunsetted. And
yeah, once you got there, right?
There were no, it went about 4, maybe 5 years. It was still a thing not too long ago. I also appear periodically on Live Coding Happy Hour with Josh Nereus and Dave Slusher when I can. Right now, there is a big project about to launch that I am staying focused on that my status meeting kind of runs over that happy hour. So unfortunately, I can't make as many as I'd like to, but hopefully that will be clearing up soon. You can find me in the community. And like Kreg, we share many of the same hobbies, which is kind of how we got to know each other through podcasting.
That's right. Yay.
Next slide.
So marketing kind of fell flat on this. So I just had to do my own work here.
Ahead of the curve. That's all. We're just ahead of the curve.
Yeah. Okay. We're ahead of the curve. We're ahead of marketing. How about that? So if in case you're looking forward to Knowledge 18 and you're fresh off your hangover from Knowledge 17, it's in May of next year, May 7th through 10th. And it's going to be back in Las Vegas, Nevada.
Woohoo!
Is it at the Venetian? No, I'm not sure which hotel.
It's either the Venetian or the Palazzo. They're kind of connected. I can't remember, but you'll start seeing it. It's not too early to start priming your boss for budget dollars for that. And if you need justification, the reasons are still on the Knowledge 17 site that you can use from last year. Why should you go? Well, there's networking to be had. There's lots of hands-on labs. Whether you're an architect or developer or a CIO, there is something for everyone at Knowledge, and we encourage you to go. It is a wonderful time, and I hope they bring back the buttons from Knowledge 17. That was fun.
The buttons.
The badges, the real-life badges.
Real life, yeah. So yeah, I had a good time this last time. mostly because all the stuff I was working on mostly worked. So that's a plus, right?
That's right. Hey, this was your of the 3 that you were responsible for all the knowledge labs. This was a decent year. It came out really, really well. We did not have a catastrophe.
No, so it went really well. I was happy with it, and a little exhausted at the end of the whole thing, but it was well worth it. And I love going there to meet all the people I've spoken to only through email or via WebEx. Yeah, so it's nice to press the flesh and see some people.
It's also fun to see what other conferences and things are happening around the area, like the National Pie Competition that I ran into at the Rosen City Center Hotel Sunday night. That was a story for another time. We won't spend time here because we do have some workflow stuff to do.
Yeah, I was just. I'm sorry. As a side note, remember the podcasting expo, and they had the portable.
It was the municipality's like a garbage truck expo.
Yeah, portable disposal or whatever it was. That was kind of funny. All right, lead us in the quick tip there, buddy.
I will lead you in the quick tip, and to do that, I need to share my screen. So let me lock and share, and we'll just do entire screen. That should work. Present to everyone. There we go. So I have a very simple table that's been extended from task, and my quick tip is how to put that little show workflow UI action on there. This is a quick tip because it's called copy and paste. It's a very handy thing if you have a workflow, and I do. This particular table has a very simple approval workflow. If it's rejected, it sends a notification that says starry, changes the state to close incomplete. You can read all about it. It's not a very complex workflow, but I would like to show the context of this workflow, and I can't do that unless I go to workflow context. And this isn't a bad place to know about, but it's not the most user-friendly to show your end users how to do this. Like, oh, where's workflow context? Workflow versions, active context. There we go. Do I have one for this workflow? And I got to work through potentially thousands of these records or more. So what I am going to do is go to UI actions. And in there is a UI action called show workflow. I'm just making the filter real easy. And it likes to do this sometimes in list v3. I noticed of late. It puts in contains equals, even though the equals should say is.
Right.
We'll fix that. And my favorite happens to be this change request. These are all very, very, very similar. Oh, looks like I picked SC request. Make sure that one works as well. And obviously I can't edit this because I'm not in the right scope. I am in the TechNow 38 scope, and this isn't going to work for me. So there's a couple things I want to do. In fact, I do want to take the change request one because I'm more familiar with it. That script did not look familiar. There we go. Okay, that's what I usually do. And I will just do an insert and stay. It's going to create a copy in my scope. But cool. Of course, I don't want this on I want this on my table, not on the change request. So I go to work, and there are a lot of tables that start with work.
Yes.
Mine is simply called work. There it is. My TechNow 38 work table. There's one other thing I need to change, and that is right down here. The workflow script include is in the global scope. And if I try to do this, it's going to bark at me and say, I don't know what. There is no workflow script include in my scope. So I just put in global there. And now I save it. Those two things, just create a copy, change the table, add global. I go back to my TechNow work table, and I have a record that does not have a context. Otherwise, I would have seen this. Let's create a new one. And I'm just going to say hello. There's nothing special about this. Save it. And it should kick off the workflow.
I always use descriptive short descriptions.
And I don't see it. So let's go to configure UI actions. Show workflow. Did I not publish the workflow? This would be a terrible, terrible demo if it didn't work. Okay, it's there.
Way to go, Chuck.
Yep. All that practice, and things fall down. We'll save that for live coding happy hour. Here's my work. Here's my workflow. Let's just check the properties real quick. I know I published it already, and I have a published and a checked out copy. So looks like we're going to get a little bit of UI action debugging here. Workflow properties says I'm going to start it on this table. There are no conditions. There are no inputs. There are no activities. Tell you what we're going to do. Let's go back to workflow contexts. I like this little history thing here, by the way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it has come in handy a few times.
Started. Oldest to newest. It has not started a workflow for me. Oh. All right, Mr. Workflow Guy, why isn't my workflow kicking off? Just for grins, I will do a publish and try it again.
Yeah.
You're the workflow expert. What am I missing?
I'm not sure.
Save. This is good information because people don't always get this far. It's saved. That's the right table, right? Here, I'll even check a local TN X 66238 TN38 work. That's the table this is working on. We check it. Validation says everything's okay.
Mm-hmm.
I can't make it run without a... Huh. Well, I am going to find that out, and I will post it on the TechNow 38 answer sheet. What happened? Because I've done this a bazillion times. Even in the CreatorCon demo, we did this very, very quickly.
I'm not sure what's going on.
I'm not either. Anything in the chat room that we should be looking for?
Somebody in the chat room's probably going to tell you.
Someone in the chat room probably will tell me if it's like live coding happy hour. They'll just jump up and go, hey, you forgot this.
Well, that's something we've learned over the course of our podcasting career is that you say something wrong and people will call you out.
It's a community.
Yeah.
It's a very effective one. All right. Well, I don't want to steal too much time from your content. I'm just going to look at this real quick again. We didn't get the error about global. It did give us a cross-scope privilege. We do have form link. It's active. Insert update. Client is running. Interesting. Well, doesn't matter how many times you practice. Sometimes it just doesn't go the way you want. So let's...
It's like working with children and animals.
Yep. Something learned in public address class in college.
That's right. So you got me logged back on, right?
I am back on you. You have control.
Okay. Thank you for that informative quick tip. So we're going to move on to some workflow tips and tricks. And some of these may be advanced. Some of these you may be familiar with. And it's always good to see a reminder. You know, sometimes you might forget about something or something will clue you in on another aspect. So that's the purpose of this. And you can see there's Bugs Bunny doing his orchestration thing. And he's thinking about the workflow process.
Okay.
So this, we're going to, when designing a workflow and the GUI editor, that you may or may not think of or to do, like we're going to talk a little briefly about subflows and some timers and using locks and that kind of thing. And it's always good to keep those fresh in your mind because available to you and you can utilize them. It can make things in your GUI look so much easier to deal with. You can have a workflow that it looks like it's a mile long, but if you can simplify it and make it easier to look at, anybody can come in behind you and modify it as needed. So, which is kind of the whole premise of ServiceNow is to have things that we can template and reuse and other people can modify and easily figure out what's going on.
Uh-oh. So I got a message in the community that they couldn't see my screen during that bad demo anyway. I apologize about that. We will re-record that part.
Hey, good news for you guys. You didn't miss anything.
No, you missed us debugging. I had the screen share turned on. I don't know what happened. Yeah. Okay. Apologize for that.
That's kind of weird because I could see your screen.
Yeah.
So anyway. All right. So we're moving along. So under our agenda, we're going to talk about the previous activity output, some timers. looking at the scratch pad, which is very valuable when you're producing workflows, passing data along. And we're going to look at use workflow locks, and I'm going to have some tips in there and at the end, and we'll look at a couple of tips rather, and then we'll look at the reference information at the end of the whole show. So the previous activity data is very helpful because sometimes you want to know what happened in the activity before this one, whatever this one would be. So maybe, for example, and I'll keep going back to this, is when we spin up some virtual machines in Amazon, and the next activity maybe is taking action on some of those. You want to know what happened. Did it work? Did it not? Now, some activities, of course, you have different conditions that you can just point it somewhere else if it fails.
Are those the only 3 properties, or are those the only 3 that are the 3 most common ones you interact with?
These are the 3 most common ones I interact with. There, depending on the activity, there can be a lot more, but these are the ones that that I've been using. The result, the output, and the fault description. So feel free to go dig in the code and see if there's anything else that you can get your hand on, but these are the 3 most useful ones that I've used.
Okay.
And here is an example. Excuse me, I'm getting a frog in my throat. So on the crate tags, you can see there was a failure, and I want to know what happened to that failure so I can create a log entry for, so somebody can easily see what happened. And when I'm like, I have a lab record, and it's for, this is in our instance where we spin up labs like we did at Knowledge. And I have a log table, basically, so I don't have to go dig through all the logs to find out exactly what happened on this particular lab. It'll take that fault description and it'll put it in the a journal field, or it's kind of like a journal field. It's more like, a journal table that I created. So you can see that you can follow the blue line here and see that a failure goes down to the update journal field on error. And here is a picture of the script that I have in that activity, the activity of the update journal field. And you can see in the if condition, I have if previous underscore activity dot result is failure.
So it's a string that where is that defined? How did you get failure? Was that part of the activity's definition?
No, yes, but that's part of this activity's definition. If you run your own activity, you can certainly set your own variables, maybe the activity, because you can do that on conditions. You can set a, different condition for.
Gotcha.
You can create your own condition. But anyway, this result is what we're looking at. And result is either going to be, what was it, success or failure? And you can see right there in that thing, in the conditions there. So if it's a failure, and of course we're pointing straight to this, and it said is a failure, we want to take the activity description and put it somewhere so somebody can read it. So you see I'm building a message, and at the end of that message, I'm using previous underscore activity dot fault description, fault underscore description, and that'll tell me what happened. And in this case, it's really XML that came back from Amazon saying, something launched, something didn't work, or whatever the condition may be. And then I, of course, update my table and everything else. So the previous activity can be very handy when you want to know what happened. Maybe you're doing an if condition. That's another good example. You want to do something else if it does this, So there's a couple examples. So let's move along to 1-second timers. And I'm going to go into a demo and you can see some of this stuff. The 1-second timers are very helpful in demonstrating that things are moving along. Some workflows, if you have an activity that is long running, and I have one that I've doctored up, so the activity basically will wait for 5 seconds, okay, just for demonstration purposes.
So why help me understand why you would want this? Because normally if you go and say show workflow, you're going to see your start turned blue, meaning it's complete. Your first step is turned blue, and that the next thing is green and it's running. Where would a 1-second timer come in helpful, and why would you want to slow your process down by even a second or 5 seconds?
Well, I would argue that a 1 second is not going to make or break anything, but The reason you want to do that is when you look at the GUI, like when you look at the context and you pull up the workflow view and you want to see where your workflow's at. If you have a long running activity, it'll appear like it's not doing anything. It may not be green, especially if you just started the workflow. So the 1 second timers will help show you the process where you're at. It'll, because it'll kick off, it'll turn blue, and the next thing's green. So it's helping you show the it's trying to show that a workflow is not necessarily hung, but it's showing progression is the main thing. And you'll see in my demonstration in a minute where one workflow looks like it's not even starting, and then all of a sudden it's done. The second one, you can see the progression. So really it's for, I would say probably more for debugging and making sure things are working right. This is also great from coming from slow activities, like you're waiting on somebody to approve something. You want to see that 1 second timer where it ran right after that workflow, so it's not on to the next thing and just hanging again or appearing to hang. Does that make sense? I hope it makes sense.
Yeah, show me a demo of this. I think it'll make more sense.
Okay, I will. And this also applies to right after workflow, like I said, tasks and approvals. Basically, any step in which the user action will cause progress. You want to see it just hanging. And that brings me to this right here. Here's an example, demonstrate it here in a minute. But I put a 1 second timer in there. Then I have a long running activity. a log running activity. Sorry, the typo there. And then it ends. But when you go to run, you'll see it appears if I don't have that timer. So let's take a look at the demo. And change it over to all right. Can you see my screen there?
Yep.
Okay.
Don't watch that video, TechNow number 9.
Yeah, I know.
Guys,
I don't know.
All
right, so let me open these. This is a workflow with locks and without. So here's a workflow, and you can see that there's a not lock. I want the timer.
We were doing 1 second timer.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
He jumped ahead.
Here's a workflow with timers, and I put the with in there so I'd make sure I'd opened it. Anyway, so there's the 1 second timer. This activity is really just some JavaScript that I'm running that makes it sleep for 5 seconds just so we can appear that we have something going on. So any activity that's doing something, maybe a long script or who knows, maybe it's doing some REST calls. And here's one without.
Okay.
So I'm gonna run it with. Actually, I'll run it without first. Do I need to enlarge it or anything?
Yeah, if you could, that'd be great.
How's that?
Perfect.
Okay. So I'm gonna hit the play button. And here's the without timers. And you'll see it's I click start. I'm waiting.
Yeah.
I'm waiting. Is it doing something? Don't know. And then done.
So if I were to, when you hit start, if I were to look at that context, wouldn't it show begin is running, run script is green?
Perhaps. I don't know. So that's just the thing. That's the point of the 1 second timers, to help break it up a little bit and help show that progression. You can go, oh, it went here, it's here, it's here. It may not be green if it's doing something really heavy. I don't know. So there's some times when I've seen it where it looks like the workflow is hung, but then when you have a couple of those timers in there, you can see that, oh, it passed through that already and it's on to the next thing.
Okay. I found another use case for the 1 second, or maybe it was a 5 second timer on the community just yesterday. Somebody said they updated a record and their workflow was going through a decision. I think they were changing the state or some choice field, but before the operation was complete, the workflow had already engaged and went, oh, no, my if condition. They were doing an if condition with a condition, not a script, but they did the condition, and it kept evaluating to false, even though the record, they said it, they saved it, it was true. They put in a 1 second timer right before the if statement. I think they eventually bumped it up to 5 or 10 or something, because they said 1 wasn't enough. And they said, hey, it's working fine. So
Yeah.
it may help with synchronization of, like you said, long running processes that could take a few seconds. I encourage that person to go do a little more investigative digging because there may be something awry. Normally, when you submit, the operation happens, the workflow engages, and there is an order to this. We'll provide a link at the end of the show that there is a link that says, when do business rules run? When do UI actions? When do data policies engage? When does the workflow engine engage?
Right.
Because there is an order to all of these, and you may not know what order it's happening, or you may assume something is happening.
Yeah.
But it doesn't come along until after. So this is a real nice way of helping to say, workflow, hang out for a second or 5.
Or 5, yeah. So yeah, that's kind of what I'm doing here, to see it run. So let me run this one. And you watch when I click start, you immediately see the GUI and the progression.
Yep.
See, 1 second timer.
Okay.
And then you'll see it, kick on. So it's helping show that progression is the big key. So there you go.
So it's more of a visual aid thing.
Yeah, because if you go to view the context and you look at the workflow view, you don't want to sit there and second guess. Is it just sitting there? Is it doing something? And that's kind of what that does. Now, let me show you something else. So if I go to my context, and this is a segue into the next thing where we're talking about the scratch pad. Excuse me, let me take a drink of water. So this the scratch pad. Sorry, I'm sorry.
We now pause for station identification.
That's right. WSN. All right. So I mentioned earlier in the slideshow in the PowerPoint that we're going to talk, the scratch pad can be your friend. Well, I set in that workflow, I set some scratch pad variables. I did that just for demonstration purposes here. So some of these, your workflow context, when you go to one, let me pull this up. So if I go to one, it's always helpful to know what's in your scratch pad, especially when you're debugging a workflow and you don't know exactly what data got pulled in and you want to make sure it looks right. Here's a tip that I found a long time ago and has saved me a million times. So if you go to config, go to the workflow context and you pull up the configure layout. If you scroll down, you'll see where it says scratch pad, because all this data, all that data is stored in the database in ServiceNow. So there it is right there. So you can view it right there on the context menu or form. So you can see I set some in there. Yeah, this is great. So you can, if it's very simple, you can of course read it right here. If you need to, you can pull it out, stick it in an editor and reformat it so you can clearly what's going on, with your variables.
And the scratch pad is alive for the duration of the context. So you could put something in an activity right up early in the workflow and consume it much later in the workflow if you wanted to, correct?
Yes. And as a matter of fact, and this is something I'm sure a lot of people are already aware of, but the scratch pad can also keep arrays and objects in there too. So this is a
JavaScript object you can populate any way you want.
Yeah, so it's great to be able to look at this and go, oh, in that array, I had 2 elements. I was expecting 5. So putting the scratch pad on, I would argue that this probably needed to be there by default, but that's a little tip I had for, doing some troubleshooting. Yeah,
I like it. Good troubleshooting.
So let me go back to the PowerPoint. Excuse me. Share my screen, go back here. All right, so that was a quick demo. So let's talk about locks for a minute. And I don't know if a lot of people need locks.
Loch Ness?
Yeah, Loch Ness, the Panama locks, get a boats through. Sorry, I'm getting choked up because this is such an emotional thing. Let me get another drink of water. Sorry.
We'll go with that. So what are locks good for in ServiceNow, Kreg?
Okay, I'll give you a good example for a lock. Well, one, you know what a lock does? It prevents other instances of the workflows that are similar workflows from continuing past one another. So if you have a workflow that's going to be talking to like an API. And again, I'll go back to my spinning up labs with AWS. There's an API rate limit. So when you don't want to hammer it too hard, they start to scale you back. They start to throttle your API calls, and it could be a problem if you're hitting it too much in a row. So if you use a lock, you can use a lock with a special key that if I'm hammering the same account at this API, they're not going to run concurrently. They're just going to run serially. So I can go, okay, this workflow will run, this workflow will run, this workflow. And that's what the locks will kind of do. So it'll keep things, it'll keep workflows from running at the same time. Hitting similar records on ServiceNow, and you don't want 5 workflows changing the same record, or I don't know. It's just a good example. So locks will keep your workflows from running over each other.
Okay.
Yep, and it's in the docs. Yes.
Could this be used to make a series of, say you've got change tasks lined up on a change request, and each change task had its own workflow. Could you use that to trigger them in a specific order?
I don't know about order pretty much, but you can.
First serve.
It's more like first come, first serve. I think the idea of the locks would be more for making whatever queue you had of the same workflow running serially, rather than running in parallel and just bam, all run at the same time.
But it doesn't necessarily say run this record first, run this record second. It's whoever recognizes that the lock has been released first, then proceeds on and locks it for the rest of the contexts that are trying to fight for that?
Yes.
Okay.
And you'll kind of see that in my example a little bit.
Show me the example.
Yeah, I'll show you the example in just a second. So one of the keys, and we talked about the 1 second timer, one of the tips that I found in the docs site that we have for ServiceNow, it mentions putting a 1 second timer before a lock activity, especially if that lock is at the beginning of your workflow, and it's a rare condition, but the lock activity may not be able to differentiate between 2 different workflows at the same time. So if they're both trying to get this lock at the same time, there could, like I said, there's a rare condition where you may get the lock on both workflows. But when you put that 1 second timer in there, it breaks it up a little bit, and the code, I guess, because the workflow has a chance to actually do something and it's actually starting to execute, the owning entity, maybe a script or some kind of script include or something like that you're kicking off multiple workflows, it won't be the owner. The actual workflow will be the owner. And then when you get that lock going on, then it can differentiate between the two. All right. So you want to use them sparingly, as I mentioned before, because it will cause your common workflows to run serially, not parallel. So it could potentially be a bottleneck in your system if you were relying on this particular one workflow to do everything, and you're locking it up from other ones. So you want to try and refactor your workflow so they don't need serialized execution, and you want to make sure that you don't lock it up the entire time of the workflow, only during the activities that you want to lock, that you don't want overrunning each other. So maybe your workflow is doing some scripting ahead of time and getting variables ready. You don't want to lock that part up. You may want to lock just the activities that need the lock and then unlock it as soon as possible.
Got it.
So that way your other workflows can actually do some stuff. So let's go take a look at the demo. Go back here. Pull up my thing. So here you go. Let me close these two, and here's a workflow with locks. And I'll show you this is a good example of a workflow that's going to use a lock, but it's specific to, as I mentioned before, if we were talking to Amazon for a particular account, maybe we have 2 different workflows talking to 2 different accounts. I don't care if they're hammering it at the same time. But if we're talking on the same account, there's a chance you're going to get throttled because there's maybe 2, 5, or whatever calls right within a second. You don't want that. You want to break it up. So that's what we have the locks for.
So if I read this right, if I've got, let's say, just keep it simple, 2 contexts that are running off the same version, they're both going to run the 1-second timer. One of those 2 is going to hit the lock activity first and say, it's not only going to lock the context, but it's going to check if the lock is open or closed. Correct?
Yeah, and it would wait for, there's a condition in here, and I'll show it, where how many times it will check to see if it can get a lock before it actually times out.
Okay.
So, yeah, so you don't want a workflow just running indefinitely waiting for a lock that never happens. You can set timeout values and durations, so you can say if it doesn't get a lock within an hour, move along.
And that's what would cause it to fail. It says I'm out of duration or I'm out of attempts.
Yes, that's the big thing of the fail. So it would just sit there and wait until those conditions are met. Then it'll fail and say, I couldn't get a lock.
It's not that it failed to get the lock. It's that it failed for some. It failed to get the lock because it was locked by somebody else.
Gotcha. Yeah, or another workflow. Okay. That's right.
Yep.
So here we're running the 1-second timer, and then we'll take a look at this now. As part of show properties, well, I couldn't see that. I have a input called account. Okay, so I'm going to pass in, could be a sysID or maybe a name or something like, there's probably a sysID. There's something in there that says this is the, the ServiceNow AWS account. So here, when we go to create the lock, let me scroll up a little bit. I got the descriptive name. Here's the key. Now, if you put in a generic name in there, everywhere that lock has that same name, it's going to hang up. Even if it's 2 different workflows altogether, if you use the same lock key, then they're going to, they're all going to get locked up. So you don't want to do that. That will slow down your system terribly. So here, what I'm using, I'm using my input that for the U_account_ launch instances to make a unique key for this account. So if I have if I have the 2 workflows trying to talk to the same account, one's going to wait for the other. But if there's a different account on a different workflow,
doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. It'll just pass right along. And you can, of course, use current or some kind of other variable. I don't know. You can be the judge there. There's the max duration. That's the maximum duration the activity can hold this lock. And you can set a time in that. And down here at the bottom, this is kind of what you were talking about. How many attempts? So how long do you want to keep trying to get a lock? And here I've got 1 hour, and it's going to, I probably shouldn't have put max attempts 1,440.
No.
But you see,
that's a lot of days.
That's a lot of hours. So it would wait an hour, try again, wait an hour, try again until this is exhausted, then it would fail. And when it fails,
it's actually 60 days. Do you want your workflow to wait around for 60 days?
Yeah, that's a little excessive. It depends on what you're doing, but yeah, that might be. So we do our stuff, and then we want to unlock it. So we set it free.
And that just releases you. So you still need the same key, right? To say this is what those better darn well match, or you better know what you're doing. You could have multiple locks in multiple places and say, I'm releasing this lock for this API, but not for the other API. But that's some pretty coordinated stuff. That's the purpose of the key.
Exactly. So you need to make sure this does match your lock. Otherwise, you're going to have some big problems.
Gotcha. Neat concept.
And that's it. Yeah. So I can't actually run this one to demonstrate, but you get the idea. That's what it does. So we'll lock it up, set it free. Remember to do that. Remember to unlock it. Otherwise, it's also probably best practice to put in how long, max duration, and maybe a little longer than you expect the workflow to actually run if it did run with no problems. But yeah, so keep that in mind. So let's see.
I think the max activity count was next.
Yes, and you know what? I don't know if I have. Let's see. Let me pull this up. Excuse me. So in Cloud Labs, which is our lab provisioning system. Excuse me. I'm getting choked up. I'm so emotional about all this stuff. This is a good example. You can see this workflow. We got a lot of loops. There's a lot of things that's got to go on. For each of these labs, we may have one or more images we need to spin up.
Mm-hmm.
For example, at Knowledge 17, some of our ITOM classes have a ServiceNow instance and a Windows instance.
Mm-hmm.
So there's two images. Okay, so I want to loop through those and spin up what I need. So if you can look at my workflow here, and I'll try and zoom in a little bit since this is kind of big, but excuse me. You can say I'm looking for disabled accounts. Then we come up here. This activity, I check to see if I have any images to spin up. If the length is 0, then we drop out. If it's more than 0, we keep going. So Are we done? That's the question. Are we done? Yes or no? Yes, we're done. It'll go out one way. No, we got to keep going. So that's a little reverse logic there. So here, I also wanted to show this too. When we're doing a loop, I build an array and I pop that list. So I pull a record, pop it, and continue on. Then that activity can actually zero out, as you saw before, and end. So here I pull the record, I do all my stuff, and loop through it. Now, here's where the max retries come in. When let's see, so for this example, I only have maybe 2 images. Okay, it could be more. It could be some other kind of workflow that you're doing, and you have 20 or 30 things. And when you loop through them, you can see all these activities it's got to do between the loops.
Right.
All right. So you got to be careful when you do a heavy loop like this, because what do we got? Like 10 activities, maybe. What do we got? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
15.
Yeah, at least. Yeah, maybe 15. So when it goes to loop through this, your workflow may end before you expect it to or need it to.
There's a safety limit.
It's a safety limit, kind of like what we were talking about with the locks, and the duration. You don't want it to hang up too long. So that's what this is for. So if you go to, let me check this. No, I don't want to check it out. Let's see, properties. There is a value in here that you can set. Activities, max activity count. There it is. Yep. I have it set for 100.
It defaults to 100.
Yeah. Now keep in mind, this is activities, not loops. It's not going to, we're going to go through this loop 100 times. No, it's how many activities. I mean, who knows how many times you're going to loop, because the workflows are kind of open-ended. But if you do it, you have to count it by activity. So I know I've got about 15. I'm usually looping through it twice, no more than 3 in my example here, in spinning up labs. So you want to be sure to have max activity count, and that's not just the ones in your loop; it's also the rest of them in your workflow. So you want to keep an eye on that. Otherwise, your workflow will say, "Hey, terminated."
And we have seen this before internally.
Oh my gosh!
It comes up, and all of a sudden your workflow just dies in the middle of a stream, and you go, "What happened?"
Yeah, actually, I think it comes up as canceled, doesn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, so it'll look canceled. And you're like, what? Who canceled that? And I remember the first time I started working with workflows, this is when I first started at ServiceNow. I'm like, why did it stop? And
it's a good thing to know about. This just came up a couple of days ago in the community. Somebody asked, is there a way to disable it? The answer is no. It is a safety valve for you. You can't say run indefinitely, or you could get an endless loop in your workflow, which would be crazy, especially if you're being charged for some API. You don't want to go that far. If you get 15 cents every time you hit Google Translate and it says, okay, I'm going to do this 100 bazillion times, you just racked up a heck of a bill. So keep it in mind. There are cases where you need to expand it to 1,000, 10,000. Really depends on how your workflow is. If you start getting crazy numbers like in the millions, you may want to refactor your workflow. There may be some logic optimization that you can do.
Yeah, and that would lead into let me change. Oh, come on. Not me. Don't look at me. Don't look at the wizard behind the curtain. Let me go back to my PowerPoint.
Craig's got a new computer.
Yeah, this is where what you just alluded to. is if you have to refactor your workflow because it's really huge, don't be afraid to use sub workflows. And that might be a good excuse to, instead of expanding your, not excuse, a good use case for instead of saying 10,000 activities, break it out and let the sub workflows do their thing.
Yeah,
so you
each
don't
one of those might be running 50 activities, and but it's being called 20 times. There's 1,000. Yeah. So but yet neither workflow has to extend beyond 100.
Right, exactly. So breaking it up one be easier to maintain, because that will go back to what I was talking about earlier. Don't make huge workflows.
Yep.
You want to make them small enough and easy enough for somebody to come behind you and if need be. And a couple more of my quick tips. Consider using ifs or switches. There's a difference between the two. An if is pretty yes or no. Actions and off into different areas. So in my example, and something up in AWS or maybe Azure, I can use the switch and cloud provider. I need to run this workflow, run this sub workflow, move it around. So there's good conditions for the if or switch. Be sure to pick the right one that is for you. Also, the wait for workflow event can be helpful too. Maybe you need to have a workflow stop and wait for something to happen. The wait condition is good, or maybe you want something else to run. Maybe another script in the system would run and kick off an event. Then the wait for a workflow event will certainly do that. So I think one of the examples was it a catalog request? I think it's in the docs site, and a script would run, do some kind of event which is totally separate from this workflow, and the workflow would wait for that to happen to take off. So
nice, good stuff to know. Yeah, the more you know about the activities you got at your disposal, the better off you'll be to solve problems.
Right.
Just like programming.
Right. Oh, look, we're gonna talk about the JSON beautifier.
You didn't put in my link to the engine thing. I'll add that in the comments. That's all right. No, don't do it. Don't do it. I'll put it in the comments on the
I
the
can edit it real quick. Yeah. So anyway, you want to take us out with the reference information?
Yeah, lots of good information that you can find on the old wiki, still full of good basic general workflow getting started. A lot of that has been transferred over to the doc site. We are always working to make that better for you. The new Jakarta information is out there. There are some new features. Keep up to date on that. It is version context specific, so you can look at Helsinki specific information without getting a bunch of footnotes about the other versions. So the YouTube, we have other videos on scripting and workflows and orchestration, some deep dive stuff, and some getting to know it basic 101 information on our YouTube channel. Don't forget, you can always go to developer.servicenow.com. This is where Dave Slusher lives, physically, I think, sometimes.
No kidding.
Get yourself a free personal developer instance, sandbox, play around with this stuff, learn more. You can make all the mistakes and wipe it and restart at your leisure without endangering your organization's dev instance, for example. You could turn on plugins and say, nope, that wasn't right for me. Can't do that on your company's instance too effectively. And then if you want a complete listing to all of these, the red link at the bottom, bit.ly ServiceNow-TechNow is where you can go and get the whole collection from time immemorial. You can also follow us in various other places. There we go.
Yeah.
There you go. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, Kreg. I am going to undo the screen lock and the cameras at this point so we can at least smiling phase out of this. Appreciate the info on workflows. Very informative.
Thank you. You're welcome.
And look for us next month. We hopefully will have Dave back in the seat. We don't have a topic picked out yet. That's what we do right after this is done. We say, hey, what do we do next? Sometimes it comes from you. So if you've got suggestions, certainly go over to that link we just showed on the screen at bit.ly/ServiceNow ServiceNow-TechNow, or search for TechNow on the community. You'll get that list.
That's easy for you to say.
If there's something you want to see, we want to hear about it because it's valuable to you. It's valuable to us. Sometimes we pick them at random and stick in anecdotes. As I mentioned on this show, 2 of them right from this past week that fit into this topic perfectly.
Yep, absolutely.
Because I had a workflow awareness on, knowing this topic was coming up. Maybe it wasn't. Great place to go. So thank you. Till next time, take care. Whoop. Play that one. Wrong soundbite. Missed it by one button. Thank you very much. And until next time, take care. Bye now.
Bye, y'all. See ya.